the gold narrative might not be there just yet for Bitcoin. However, I think what is indisputable is that more and more institutions are looking to Bitcoin as not necessarily a safe haven play, but as a corporate treasury play. Welcome back to Bitcoin.com's The Weekly, which is the world's #1 recap and digest of the biggest stories in the Bitcoin and cryptoverse. I'm Graham Stone, joined by David Sensel, and this week we've got Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell squaring off against Trump. We've got the Bitcoin as digital gold meme being questioned by JP Morgan. A declining US dollar and what it means for Bitcoin, analysis of the recent meme coin rally, and a look at XRP and whether it will flip Ethereum. Before we get into that, if you like this content, don't forget to follow us. Hit like, light us up in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe to David's weekly newsletter, which provides a 5-minute summary of the most important Bitcoin and crypto stories of the week, with tons of links to sources and extra reading if you want to go down the rabbit hole on anything. David, I read your newsletter again this week, and I found it to be, as usual, a wonderful recap of the week's stories. So,
were you tired, bro?
Yeah, exactly. That the title was what was it again? Something about exhaustion.
I'm tired, boss.
I'm tired, boss. That's right. And by the way, if you want to subscribe to that, just go to Bitcoin.com. You can find a form, a field to enter your email. The newsletter comes out Friday evenings in Asia, usually. So, yeah, you can find it. It'll hit your inbox depending on what time zone you're in towards the end of the week. All right, let's get into it. So, David, can you kick us off with the first story, please?
Yeah, all right. So let's talk about Mr. J. Powell punching back. Last Wednesday, at an Economic Club of Chicago event, Mr. Jerome Powell directly addressed the tariffs, Trump's calls for Powell to cut interest rates, and more. In his speech, Powell made it very clear that the Fed will not be intervening in markets anytime soon. It's quite a unique situation, I think, for for the chairman to do this. So I was a little surprised at how direct he was speaking to the president. Utilizing a little humor, Powell commented on the rising levels of uncertainty. This is a great quote. As the great Chicagoan Ferris Bueller once noted, life moves pretty fast. For the time being, we are well positioned to wait for greater clarity before considering any adjustments to our policy stance, end quote. That's Mr. Jerome Powell. He's using a little humor. He's in Chicago. He's talking about Ferris Bueller. But most importantly, he is referring to the level of volatility and uncertainty that's happening right now. Also, I think he's putting a little dig at Trump himself and the Trump administration, which has kind of been all over the place, flip-flopping on tariffs and all kinds of things around that. Initially, markets didn't like Powell's statements. You saw very mild sell-offs in all major assets. However, that was short-lived, and markets recovered afterwards. In my newsletter, I talked about this, and I think people are just also really exhausted, and so markets didn't really, they sold off a little bit, but they didn't really move that much, right? Because people are just kind of like, I don't know what's going on. We're going to wait and see. However, Trump really didn't like Powell's remarks. I think he took it quite personally. He posted on Truth Social this pretty interesting statement, and it ended with Powell's termination cannot come fast enough. So it's worth a read, the whole statement if you haven't seen it. I think most people have. And that's kind of the biggest news that we had last week. Thankfully, it wasn't, on balance, it wasn't that big of news, but it was still pretty interesting. Starting off with the overall significance, I think Powell's making it clear that he is not Trump's lapdog, that he is fiercely independent of the executive branch. And he made it clear that he doesn't want to kind of support or help the executive with these trade wars and fallout from the trade wars, at least at this time. So yeah, that's kind of to start with. Graham, any thoughts?
Well, okay, so Powell's term is set to end in May 2026. So you can't really fire the chairman of the Federal Reserve, but this is Trump, so anything is possible. And if you just check out markets.bitcoin.com, by the way, we now have prediction markets data there. So
nice.
Just looking at this, Powell out as chair this year. This is on the Kalshi prediction market, and it's been rising. Where it's still relatively low, but 25% chance. And caveat, it's a small volume market, but people are betting on this. The chances of Trump somehow removing Powell as Federal Reserve Chairman have been increasing. That's interesting.
Yeah, I read some things over the weekend. I didn't go too much into it because, I think this is just kind of, I don't know. Anyway, but I read a couple things saying that it's a gray zone. It's legally dubious whether he can do this or not. Again, that's never stopped Trump before. But I personally don't think that he's going to try to do this. I think he'll probably take another approach. I heard some ideas being bandied around Twitter, things like he could choose some person, the successor, and publicly state, like, this is going to be my guy or gal, most likely a guy. This is going to be my person for this job, and then start putting this person out in front of the media months and months and months in advance of Powell's end date next May. And this could in effect kind of allow him to have a quote unquote shadow chairman, where they're speaking directly to the market, preparing the market for whatever Trump wants to happen. And then what's the market going to do? Are they going to listen to the kind of lame duck current chairman, or are they going to pay attention to the chosen successor who will then implement Trump's policies?
Yeah. And just backing up, just to be clear here, Trump wants the interest rate lower. Powell's saying, no, we're not doing that. Why does Trump want the interest rate lower?
Well, for a number of reasons. I mean, first of all, Trump and Besant have been very clear that they are focused on bringing the long end of the curve down, right? The 10-year specifically, but also the 30-year. The 10-year is kind of a benchmark for a lot of other loans. In America, it's the benchmark for mortgages, right? So the 10-year rate, whatever that is, let's say it's like around 4.5% or something, then they add on 2, 3, 4% on top of that, and then you get your kind of standard mortgage rate for a house in America. And then that has traditionally been a key driver of the economy, is how easily it is to get a house, right? You can imagine kind of the flow through effects on all that, right? Like then more people are buying lumber, a lot of people are being employed to build the houses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So it's
now, as this all relates to Bitcoin, traditionally, I guess it depends on how you're viewing Bitcoin. Is it a safe haven asset? Is it an asset that benefits in a high risk environment. So as historically, it's been the latter, right? So when interest rates are low, you get a more risk on, people are more risk on, and that result is a higher Bitcoin price. Is that right?
Yeah. So in general, what happens is when interest rates are high for let's say like sovereign bonds, so like the U.S. Treasury, then money doesn't. Lots of money can just park in this kind of risk-free, right? The risk-free thing, and so then there's no real push to go out and find riskier things to make money. But as interest rates go down, that money will not stay parked in treasuries, and it has to go further out on the risk curve, which is traditionally things like equities. And Bitcoin is usually considered even riskier than that. And so, in general, as the interest rates of these kind of sovereign bonds go down, that will you'll see money flow into riskier assets like equities and Bitcoin. Of course.
Okay. Now, obviously, as we're seeing this whole sort of monetary regime, even at the global level, sort of being rethought now, a lot of people are asking the question, how will Bitcoin perform in this environment? And one of the narratives around Bitcoin, of course, is that it's digital gold, and gold has traditionally been a safe haven asset. Okay, so you buy gold when you're not so sure about, you don't necessarily want to take risk in the markets. Okay, so that's how gold has been thought, and that's one of the narratives around Bitcoin. Now, this brings us to a report from J.P. Morgan that was just released, basically, where they're saying that Bitcoin's safe haven asset narrative is in question. It's increasingly becoming into question. They're citing 3 straight months of ETF outflows and weak Bitcoin futures interests. Meanwhile, as everyone knows, gold has been attracting strong inflows. We just hit another all-time high, I think, yesterday, from both retail and institutional investors. So gold is positioning itself right now in this reordering of the global monetary order. If that's what is actually happening, gold is positioning itself as the top beneficiary of the safe haven and currency debasement flows.
Yeah, definitely. And this has been happening for quite some time, definitely since COVID, when the whole world just started printing money, tons and tons of money. And Bitcoin has done really, really well during this time too. I think for me, this particular report has kind of short-term implications, perhaps, because, Graham, as you know, and as we've covered for the past month or so, but in the past couple of weeks especially, there's been a lot of talk about how this is Bitcoin's moment, right? If Bitcoin is this hedge against monetary debasement, if it is a hedge against risk, certainly now is the time where Bitcoin will show itself in some degree. And so I feel like this report is maybe throwing some cold water on that, being a wet blanket, if you will. I personally think that the report doesn't matter in the long term, because I think it's going to take a lot longer for this aspect of Bitcoin to play out. I don't know if you have feelings on this, Graham.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Like, obviously, gold has been around for thousands of years. It's always been the go-to hard currency around the world, and Bitcoin is like 16 years old or something, and so it's not surprising that it hasn't fully picked up that narrative yet.
Yeah, and also like the what's it called, the overall market cap of the thing is tiny, even compared to gold. So the smaller the market cap, the less liquidity it has. The less liquidity it has, the more volatile it'll be, which means it'll be way harder to find signal in all that noise. So I don't know.
Yeah. So the gold narrative might not be there just yet for Bitcoin. However, I think what is indisputable is that more and more institutions are looking to Bitcoin as not necessarily a safe haven play, but as a corporate treasury play. So we have this this report from Bitwise. It's the Q1 corporate Bitcoin adoption report, and some key stats from here. We have corporate Bitcoin holdings surged 16% in the first quarter of 2025 to 688,000 BTC, worth about $57 billion at the current price. And there are 79 firms, according to this to the report, now holding Bitcoin on their corporate balance sheet, and 12 new firms joined in the first quarter of 2025. Now, CEO of Bitwise, Hunter Horsley, says this marks the start of crypto's mainstream era, driven by institutional adoption, favorable accounting rules, and diminishing focus on altcoins.
We've talked about this before with Sailor and was it Metaplanet on some of the other companies, but I only see this increasing over time because it's an easy play. And so the question for me is, what happens if like outflows or the price of Bitcoin accelerates? Will these firms dump en masse? I would guess not.
To realize their profits, you mean?
To realize their profits, yeah. And to let's say they decide, oh, we're entering a bear market, so let's build up our cash reserves. Anyway, I just that's to me the only thing to look at. But I only see more institutions and companies getting in on it.
Additionally, long-term data shows that when the U.S. dollar declines relative to other currencies, the price of Bitcoin rises. So on that note, we have a report from Goldman Sachs here, which they're predicting a continuing decline in the US dollar. It's already declined quite a bit in recent weeks and months, but they're predicting another 10% slide against the euro and 9% against the Japanese yen over the next year, driven by policy uncertainty and tariff-driven capital outflows. So, as I mentioned, when historically, we don't have that many data points to work with here, but historically, when the US dollar is weaker, the result is a higher price of Bitcoin. So actually, there is some really interesting report data here from Real Vision's Jamie Coots. He did a back testing showing how the DXY, which is basically that's the US dollar relative to mainly the euro, I believe.
Euro and yen, yeah.
Euro and yen. When it drops by 2% or more, and that's marked by these little, I'm not sure what that symbol is, but when that happens, Bitcoin has risen 17 out of 18 times over this period, and it goes back to 2013. So that's a 94% win rate. So a very high correlation. It's Bitcoin has risen over the following 90 days, and the average rise is 31.6%. And then when the DXY falls by 2.5% or more, Bitcoin has risen at a higher level. So it's basically, yes, here you can see on another chart, right? So here we're getting major fluctuations in the DXY and resulting in long-term increases the price of Bitcoin. Here's the dollar index. Okay, so 100 is this line right here. And when recently it's dropped below 100 again. The last time it dropped below 100 in this area was 2022. A big drop in here. And sorry, I'm not showing. I'm not. This doesn't have the price of Bitcoin on it, but basically, this theory seems to has historically held up. Do you have any thoughts on this, David?
I mean, yeah. So this is not surprising if you zoomed out from Bitcoin, and you tracked risk assets in general, particularly like equities. When the Dixie goes down, equities go up, right? So it's an inverse correlation. Again, so Bitcoin is kind of a risk asset. It makes sense that it would follow that, and that if you tracked equities, I mean that correlation goes back at least 2 or 3, 4 decades, as far as I can remember. Last time I saw it. So again, really not surprising to see Bitcoin acting in the same manner. The one thing that I would caution is, I can't remember. I saw it last week. I should have prepared it for this, but often what you see is when you see really sharp declines in the Dixie, like we've had here, it often can rally back pretty hard too. I was listening to something Brent Johnson said last week, and he said the last time that we've had this sharp of a decline, I think it was 2022 or maybe 2020, one of the two. It rallied back and above the peak to trough. So there were I think it's been 2.5 weeks of a 4 to 5% decline or something like that. And then you had just a massive rally afterwards. I'm not going to say that that's going to happen, but again, it can happen.
Maybe it's the volatility more than the actual price of the dollar that is driving this thing.
What do you mean? In what respect?
Well, we see a big move to the downside, and even though it recovers, you nevertheless see those big spikes in the Dixie have seemed to correspond with significant rallies in the price of Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I imagine so. The one that Brent Johnson was talking about was money printing, right? I think is what happened, right?
Yeah.
But again, everybody was printing money, so relative to other currencies, the dollar was stronger. But again, yeah.
All right, let's move on to a little meme coin action. We've seen a rally in the meme coin markets.
Yeah, so over the weekend, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, they did okay. Nothing surprising there. But meme coins also climbed. I think as a sector, they are now sitting over 2% for the weekend. And one of the outperformers has been Trump, which is pretty wild. It's gone up more than 8%. And the reason that this is noteworthy is that before the weekend, not everybody, but there was a lot of talk about the Trump unlocks. So approximately 40 million Trump meme coin collectibles, not coins, valued at around $200 million, began unlocking. And this is on April 17th. And Trump tokens are going to unlock, I think, over the next 2 years, daily, over the next 2 years. And most of these coins are owned by the Trump organization or affiliates. Despite that, and despite the unlocks starting on the 17th, Trump gained over the weekend. Now, as a sector, again, meme coins are up. They've been kind of in free fall for the past, at least 6 months? Since January. Basically, since the Trump meme coin
since the
launched.
Inauguration, since Melania.
Yeah, since Melania, exactly.
Dropped,
Yeah. So, an interesting development. I am watching this cautiously because I do think that they could drop further, but if you see meme coin strength, that also probably would be very telling about what the market's feeling and
Exactly.
animal spirits.
So, well, I think you could make the argument that the crypto markets, some participants in the crypto markets are looking that they're starting to take a bit of a risk on approach again, so that maybe they've priced in all the tariff chaos and they're looking at some things being resolved. Probably there's not going to be 150% or a gazillion percent tariffs on China. It's going to get resolved downwards to, I don't know, somewhere probably more reasonable between 20 and 30% maybe. And things are going to get a little calmer in the future here. It can't get more chaotic. That's maybe some market participants are taking that view, and the early ones are thinking, okay, what's going to rally the most in that environment? Maybe it's meme coins, and they're putting some chips down.
Why Trump though, Graham? That is boggling to me.
I mean, it's either that or Fartcoin. So, like, I don't know. Arguably, Trump coin seems more relevant than Fartcoin.
That is true. That is true. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess maybe meme coins are back on the menu. Hard to say. I personally am not going to be touching this right now.
Yeah, I won't be touching it right now, but I'll probably regret that. Let's move on to our last story of the week, which is XRP. Is it going to flip ETH?
What a story. All right, so Standard Chartered, major international bank, issued a very bullish forecast of XRP. They predict that the XRP cryptocurrency could go up more than 500%, and this would put each XRP token at around $12.50 by the end of 2028. And thus, it would overtake Ethereum, right? Why do they think this is going to happen? They cited 3 or 4 different bullish catalysts. Number one, regulatory clarity. We've already started to see this. Number 2, institutional adoption and ETF approval. I think this will happen this year, a spot ETF. That's my prediction, at least. Number 3, cross-border payment utility. XRP leadership has talked about the importance of cross-border payments. And Standard Chartered said that they think within the next 10 years, you're going to see a 10-fold increase in stablecoin transactions. This is not just for XRP. This is the entire industry. And of course, if XRP moves into this space, they will. Standard Chartered is saying that they're going to capture a decent chunk of this. And number 4, Standard Chartered said that XRP is trying to push into tokenized assets, RWAs. Obviously, this is a very lucrative area. Talking about sovereign bonds, maybe even tokenized, equities and real estate. Overall, you take all that into account, and they think XRP is going to go up a lot, and they think it's going to flip Ethereum. So let's just, before we talk about like whether could this happen or not, if you take this at face value, it would be a major change in the crypto market, and that's an understatement. And it would be an undeniable sign of a crisis in the Ethereum leadership and community. I don't even know if they could recover if XRP were to overtake them.
Yeah, not only that, but I mean, you could argue that it could be a huge loss for sort of the crypto Twitter royalty, and a huge win for the retail punters, I guess, for lack of a better word, because XRP is just constantly derided by the insiders. It does nothing. There's certainly some truth to this. Like the XRP chain has a minimal activity on it. On the other hand, I think as you mentioned in the pre-show, David, XRP seems to have the ear of the administration. They've done an excellent job of embedding themselves where it matters. So
And the race is still early, honestly, right? Like there's
exactly, which brings me to something I saw on X the other day, which was someone highlighting a tweet from Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse from years ago, I think something like 2018, where he said cross-border payments, which by the way, that's like Ripple's niche. Cross-border payments are to crypto as physical books were to Amazon. In other words, it's just the beginning. Cross-border payments are just the beginning. And so maybe Ripple's story is just getting started.
yes. Now, this report is interesting to me. Well, okay, let's take this at 3 points, Graham. Number one, what chance do you see this happening? XRP flipping ETH? Ballpark. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50?
I'm not going to put a number on it, and I'm also going to steal what you said before, which is whatever the chances are, they're higher now than they have been, for me at least, like ever since I don't know, 2017, when I listened to a deep dive on why Ripple's a scam.
Okay, and then I'll reiterate what you said, which is basically this is Ethereum's game to lose, right? Ethereum, if Ripple does this flippening, it's more Ethereum's failure than Ripple's win. It could be both, but it's probably more.
But Ethereum has everything to lose here.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, and so second, then you don't want to put a number on the first thing. Number two, if this were to happen, let's say it does happen, what chance of it do you think it would be kind of fleeting or more permanent?
Yeah, it could well be permanent. You know, if they actually diversify beyond cross-border payments into things like, as you say, tokenized assets, real world assets. You know, maybe Ripple does become the standard.
Okay, and last one. Where's Solana in all this? What's Solana doing? As XRP dethrones Ethereum.
Yeah, so I think that's sort of a different argument. If you look at how well Solana's done so far, the tech they have, the adoption, you could argue, I think, that Solana's a more formidable competitor to Ripple than Ethereum is.
I think personally what would happen is, if XRP dethrones Ethereum, Solana would too. And Ethereum just would go down.
Oh, yeah, for sure. If XRP, yeah, exactly. So Ethereum would be, in that scenario, in all likelihood, Ethereum is kind of like relegated to, I don't know, Ethereum Classic.
Ethereum Classic.
Levels. Okay. All right. Light us up in the comments, folks, if you have some hot takes on this one. And we're going to wrap it up there. That's it for Bitcoin.com's weekly recap. Thank you for watching. See you next week.